Right now it's the middle of April, and we're going to take a look at some of the things that are blooming right now that might be good for pressing. Here we have forget-me-nots and what I call fern leaf bleeding hearts that kind of grow wild in the forests in our area. Let's take a closer look at these two plants. There's the bleeding heart. This isn't the garden variety that you often see in the stores. This is the wild fern leaf variety that you often see in forests or grown along the side of the road in wooded terrains. And then here's forget-me-not. And forget-me-not, you can press the individual florets or a cluster. The leaves press well. Same thing for here. You can press the individual florets or the clusters, and again the leaves, excuse me for shaking the camera, and the leaves of the fern leaf bleeding heart also press very well. Here's the garden variety bleeding heart that a lot of us think of when we think of the bleeding hearts, and they're just starting to come on and flower right now. They're still a little bit early, but they're gorgeous, and both their flowers and their leaves press. And let's see if we can take a closer look. Both the leaves and the flowers press well. I'd like to press them if we ever get any decent weather again. A lot of the things that I'm going to show you today are damp with water because it's been raining for the last week, and this is the first day I've really had to be able to get out in the garden. Here's something else that's really interesting. It's a Fiddlehead from a corm or bulb, I can't remember which. And they're not like the big fancy Fiddleheids that you will often see. These are, I don't know, they're probably about 18 inches high from the ground, but they have this really cool patterning on them. Let me bring one a little closer. See if you can see how interesting that is. I really haven't pressed them or done anything with them. I just really kind of want to show them because they're so unusual. These will slowly form a clump, but it takes years and years. I think I started out with 1 or 2 bulbs here, and now you can see what we're up to at this point. Daffodils are in bloom right now, so you might want to take a look at that. Here's a pretty orange and yellow one, and in the late winter, early spring last year I showed how to press daffodils, so if you're interested in that, take a look at the playlist and or I'll link it at this video. Here's another flower that's starting to come on right now. I just call it the wild hyacinths. I'm really not sure what their particular name is. They've been in the garden for many, many years. They will form clumps and they kind of naturalize pretty well. I've got both pink and blue. I don't really do much for pressing them, but I just wanted to put them in the vlog as this is the time of the year that they're blooming. This is Grape Hyacinth. It's a bulb and it's blooming this time of the year, and it makes a slow forming clump. And they're too watery to really press very well, but again, this is just an item that I wanted to document that's blooming this time of the year. This is Basket of Gold. It's kind of a perennial alyssum is kind of how I think about it. And it did come back after I planted it last year, and the flowers press really well, and so do the leaves. The primrose that I showed you in the last video are still going strong. I need to clean them out, but you can still find some good flowers to press. So I'm real happy with how they've worked out this year. This is a Pieris that gets white flowers, but what I really like about it for pressing are the leaves. When they're red, they get really red at this time of the year, which is what the attractive thing is about this plant. And I press them like this, flat, and they actually turn a little darker, more of kind of a burgundy red. But they'll hold that color well, and they're kind of unusual and interesting. This is Azaleas, and this is the red one. This is one of the earliest ones to bloom, and they are in full bloom right now and also starting to get spent, and some other colors are going to start coming on, which I will show you in just a minute. You can press azaleas. Some of them do better than others. These do okay. The leaves do really well. And they're quite nice when they make it through the pressing cycle. Here's some more of those red rhodies, but what I wanted to show you is in the background. You can see where now the more lighter pink ones are just starting to get started. Here's one of my favorite rhodies. I love the way that the edges are red and then they go in. It kind of reminds me of a watercolor. It's got variegated leaves. It's one of the early rhodies to start, and the flowers are starting to get spent. Now, I have pressed them, and they can come out, only when I press them, I actually open up like a fan shape. Hopefully I'll get an opportunity to show you what I mean. So again, you can give it a try. Rhodies and azaleas can be a little bit finicky depending upon how thick of a cluster that you press them in, but they're certainly worth playing around with. This is a crabapple tree, and they hold their color and press really well. And so I'm hoping we get some dry weather here pretty quickly so I can get some press, because their prime time for pressing before they come and they're gone is very short. Probably a 2-week window from the time you see these buds now until the time they start getting too funked out to press. But if you have any trees that are blooming and have buds, certainly don't forget about the trees. This is a Powys Castle Artemisia, and they are really good for silverish color foliage. I really love them because they kind of press fern-like, and the actual backside is even more silver than the front side. So this is the side I work with when I press flowers. See how silver? I don't know if the light's catching how silver they are. The sun's out in some spots. These are beautiful. Here's another plant that has exceedingly interesting leaves. They hold their color for years and years. Only last year I didn't get any that were this shade. I don't know why, but I can see right now I've got a bunch of them, so I'm going to have to get out and press them. I don't know what it's called. It gets those tiny clusters of, see if I can find some. It gets that tiny cluster of yellow flowers, and those also press. And it's a slow-forming clump. It's been here for years and years. And as I said, I'm really excited that I've got some of these beautiful leaves this year that I can press. I've got some viola blooming right now. These particular plants overwintered, surprisingly to me, and so they're just starting to flower now. I have a lot of different kinds of viola and pansies, but these are the early ones, and I don't have too many blooming right now, so hopefully as the season goes on we'll get a lot of different other kinds. If you're into fiddlehead ferns, and I'm using that definition for ferns that are just starting to come up, that are still in a spiral shape like the ones you see here, now's the time to look, because they won't be in these stages very long. So if you're interested in something like that, now's the time to get out there. Ferns are starting to come up now, so it's a good time to pressing ferns and or the fiddlehead ferns. I just showed you some fiddlehead ferns of a different variety a couple of minutes ago, and then these fiddleheads, a couple coming up kind of in the middle of the screen there. Here's some more coming up. These are the fiddleheads of the Boston fern, so you can see what they look like when they're coming up. Okay, that's the highlights of the flowers that are going on right now in the garden. There's a whole lot of items that are getting ready to start flowering, and we'll be hit with a lot of stuff happening here in May and June and July. So we'll see what's going on next month. Hi, we're back in the studio now, and wanted to show you a couple of things that we looked at out in the garden that are pressed, so you can kind of see what happens. I'll just bring this whole thing up. Okay. So let's take a closer look. This is the crabapple. And then that Artemisia that I was telling you that has that silver foliage, which I just love. It's kind of a sheeny. And here's the front side. And then I was saying that I always use the back side because it's a lot more silver. It's just gorgeous. I love it in arrangements. And then here's where I did it more in a profile. And then here's the domestic bleeding heart. And then that's what I call the fern leaf or the wild bleeding heart. And then here's some leaves that go with this guy. So they do really well. Here's some forget-me-nots, open-faced. And then with the leaves. Here's some azaleas and rhodies. This is pulsatilla, open face and in profile. And then some, this is blue, this was a light pink and a purplish. This is an azalea, and this was from a rhodie. And then that bush where I showed you the leaves that were kind of that reddish color that I said went deep. These are a little bit more bronzy than last year's, which was more of a burgundy bronze. But in any event, I think they've got a really interesting color and texture. And when I said out in the garden about how I will fan the azaleas and or rhodies, this is what I was talking about. And I'll show you in a minute. I brought a couple in how I do that, but look how beautiful that is. It's just gorgeous. And if you're into card making or tags or something like that, when you use an open place like that, imagine putting some sort of arrangement or some sort of wording or something here. It's a different shade of rhodie, a different one yet, and then even another one over here with the purple. Let's take a look at how I get those fan shapes. And most of the rhodies that are available right now are all spent, so I won't be doing any of those right now, but I can at least show you for demonstration purposes. Now, you'll see on here where these three are kind of more rounded, and then these three are slightly more elongated. And you can do it however you want, but what I will typically do is, let me get the scissors. I will cut real close so that we kind of open up the back, and then I'll use my fingers and I'll split it. So now it's been split, and then I'll take these out. And you can save them and press them and use them in arrangements and stuff because they're very interesting. And then I just press them face down, just like that. Here's an azalea. See how that beautiful, these dots that are in there? I love that. So same thing, they're also sticky. My hands are sticky right now, so I'm going to cut the back out. Now, before I cut the back out, I just showed you the two main ways that I'll press rhodies or azalea, although some of them aren't successful, so you got to play around, is either in profile, like that, or like I just showed you, where I'll split the center and just press them. Once they're pressed, you can see the nice patterning there. Okay, that's all I have to share right now. I'm going to do a separate pressing video, and that will either be posted before or after this in the garden blog. It just depends on how the timeline works out. So if you're interested in seeing some of the flowers that we talked about in the garden and actually watching me put them in the press and talking more about that aspect, then be on the lookout for that. That may or may not be of interest for you. So thank you for tuning in and joining me on our garden stroll, and take a look at what's going on out in nature where you live, and have a wonderful day.